Max Schaefer è CEO di EchtraGames attualmente. Lui è cofondatore, ha cofondato nel 1993 Condor Inc. Incorporated, società che poi è stata acquistata da Blizzard Entertainment e l'hanno rinominata Blizzard North. Se ho capito bene c'è stata una telefonata, una semplice telefonata che ha preso Max e gli hanno detto vi vogliamo comparare. In Condor è stato Art and Design Lead di Justice League Task Force e ha contribuito al design artistico di Diablo. In Blizzard North è stato capoprogetto e direttore artistico di Diablo 2 e produttore esecutivo di Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. Nel 2003 ha cofondato Flagship Studios, nel 2008 Runic Games e nel 2016 EchtraGames. Una cosa che dovete sapere è che Max, questa è la sua prima apparizione in 2 anni. Lui da 2 anni ha la testa bassa. I'm telling him about your 2 years, your hermit period, your 2-year hermit period. 2 anni con la testa bassa lavorando su un gioco di cui non pensa posso parlare, magari accenna, e quindi soffre un po' di claustrofobia e quindi ha deciso di venire a Bologna a incontrarvi, a parlare. È la prima volta che parla con persone dopo 2 anni, quindi I just said it's been 2 years since you've spoken to anybody. So if he says things that are kind of blah, 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 like that, then you know that that's just because he's been working too hard.
That's the brain damage.
Exactly. Take it away.
All right. First, I want to thank you, Jeff and Yvonne, and especially Charlie, who has been convincing me to come out here to your amazing city for a long time. It is a magical place, and I never want to leave. So you have me now. I live here, and someone have an extra room, let me know. So, I have been making games for 27 years now, and I like to joke that I have no other marketable skills now, so I will retire from this and work in the supermarket or something like this. But in 27 years, what have we learned? And the truth is not a goddamn thing. Okay, so the first game that I ever made, and this was something that I lucked into. I never tried to make games. It was never my intention to have a career in video games. I got a degree in architecture, and the only thing I learned from that is that I did not want to be an architect. So after college, instead of getting real jobs, I got a computer for graduation. I actually was hoping that my parents would buy me a car, but it turns out the computer was a much better idea. Instead of getting a real job, 3 of us with 1 computer decided to do freelance graphics for clients. And so 3 of us would share 1 machine, and we'd work the minimum amount that we had to pay the bills and pay rent. And so this went on for a little while until it got hard to hunt down clients and get the billing, and it was just a pain. So we got a temporary job with a company that made clip art, which are the little borders and doodads that you put in your documents. This is all from the early 90s, so computer graphics and things were very primitive, and if you could turn on your machine and put a border around somebody's thing, you were a genius and a hero. So anyway, I work for this company that is making the clip art, and one day we come into the work, and the boss, who was just a little bit older than us, and they were obviously winging it, came in and said, guess what, we have a video game contract. So just from some family connection with the people who were Atari. They got a contract to make this game, and we were to do the work for it. Now, my brother and I who were working there are graphic artists, sort of graphic artists, and so we needed to hire a programmer. And so we got resumes and we looked around, and we had our first giant stroke of luck. We found a guy that looked good, we brought him in, he wanted to do it, and we hired him straight out of college, and that was David Brevik, who went on to be the creator of Diablo with us. So we got very lucky to pick a genius right away. And before we know it, we're making this dumb little game for the Atari Lynx, which I don't know if any of you remember, but This was a handheld system that was about 2 pounds, and it had a postage stamp size screen in it that was color. So it was the peak of technology at the time. And so we made this dumb game, and we had a blast making it. It was incredibly fun, and I think for some of us, we realized right now that this is actually going to be what we do for the rest of our lives. It was that much of a light bulb went off. You know, we had fun doing graphics and stuff, but this was like, yeah, we could do this. You know, and it was funny because we always played games from the very beginning. We had a computer in our house from the time there was computers to be in your house, but it never occurred to us that this is something you could do to make money. But here we are, all of a sudden, just trying to go to work in the morning, and we're making a game, and that was it. And so the takeaway for you is sometimes the door just opens right in front of you, and go through it. Take the opportunity, and there's no game too small or dumb or meaningless. This game didn't sell. It was the end of the Atari Lynx. The Atari Lynx didn't sell, so it was very difficult to sell your game for the Atari Lynx. But that didn't matter. We had made a game, and that gave us some credibility. And so this company, predictably, that we were working for, went out of business very quickly. And so during this time, my brother and myself and our partner, David Brevik, had this secret, or talked about making our own company in the future, and so we called it the Secret Project Condor, because that sounded cool. And all of a sudden, we have an opportunity to do it. The company went out of business, they bounced our checks, so instead of paying us, they gave us the computers, and that was it. We met in our partner's house, and the phone rang. Another stroke of luck. It was a publisher that had heard that we were starting up a company and offered us a list of games that we could pick one to make, which was crazy. This was the first meeting in the living room of this guy. And so we got a start, and these were, at the time, the common way to make a game was with a pub dev contract, we called it. The publisher would give you an advance on royalties, and then you paid back the advance out of your share of the game sales. These do not pay off. So this is not a style of contract that will make you money. But if you're very careful and plan very well, it can pay the bills and keep you alive. I used to tell people never do a pub dev contract because it is designed to make you fail, and by the time you make any money, the publisher has already made 3 times their investment. So I've changed my mind on that. Charlie answered earlier that if someone offers you a job, take it, because you will learn the business. If someone offers you a pub dev contract, you will get through the dev cycle. You will have no money at the end, but you will have gotten through a dev cycle. And so it keeps the lights on and the power on. And so we worked a couple of different games during this time. The first one was they offered us a list of games. Among them were some funny ones. We could make the Aerosmith game, the band, and they didn't have anything beyond that. Make the Aerosmith game. Okay. One of them was Scooby-Doo. Okay, I could see somehow you could do a Scooby-Doo game. But one of them was the Justice League Task Force, which is the DC Comics superheroes, Batman, Wonder Woman, etc. So we said, yes, we'll do that one. It was a Street Fighter clone. And the second game we made was an American football game for the Game Boy and the Game Gear, little handheld things. And those were the 2 pub dev deals that we did right off the bat as Condor Incorporated. Let's see. There. So the story I have about making these American football games is just a very simple one. We had no development system. There was no emulator. So what we actually did is it turns out that our partner David Brevik was a master of he could speed type machine language. But he would type up a bunch of code, and we would physically burn a chip, stick it on a board, shove it into the Game Boy, and see if it works. And we had to do this for the entire game. But it came out. We did the Game Boy and the Game Gear. We got better development systems as we went along, and so we didn't have to do that forever. And they didn't make any money, of course, but it taught us more how to ship games, how to meet schedules, and the biggest takeaway for us was that there was another football game out on the market, and it was the bigger franchise, the John Madden football, which to this day is the biggest American football franchise. And our versions for these were better. And that gave us the confidence to know that we can actually compete with real companies and real game makers. And so we didn't make any money, but we made confidence. So, did this come up right? Okay, so then the Sega Genesis Street Fighter game. This was a Street Fighter clone. Giant characters on the screen that we had to draw dot by dot in D-Paint. And it took hours to make one frame of Wonder Woman. And so by the end of the day, or by the end of the month, you were crazy by seeing everything in dots and how to make dots to make a picture. And so you couldn't get it out of your head. You dreamed about this. But we made it, and it was a fun project. It was tough working with the license. I think it turned us off to working with licenses. The DC people had all kinds of problems. They told us Superman cannot kick. And this is a game where you have 3 punches and 3 kicks. And so Superman can't kick. Well, we found a comic book where he's kicking. And we said, no, Superman can kick. And they said, no, Superman cannot kick. Superman does not kick in the game. But we finished it, and we go to the convention. Oh, by the way, this was signed with Sunsoft. This was a publisher that in the middle of this went out of business. And they sold the rights to Acclaim. And so Acclaim was our publisher then. So we go off to the Consumer Electronics Show to show our game. This was this was the convention at the time. It's now E3 or Gamescom or something like this. Back in the day, it was the Consumer Electronics Show. And so we were next to the car stereos and home electronics. But that's how you showed your games. And it was our first convention, so we're very excited. And we walk in, and there's our booth that Acclaim has set up, and there's our game, and it was so exciting. And then there's something strange next to it. And it wasn't quite our game, and it's like, well, what is that? It's a Super Nintendo version. We didn't do this. We didn't know about it. And so it turns out these other group of guys that looks like us walked up, the same thing, they didn't know about us. And there's not one pixel of art shared between these projects, but they're exactly the same. And so we got talking to them, and these guys were called Silicon and Synapse. Oh. And some of you may know that these were the guys that turned out to be Blizzard. And so we got to know Silicon and Synapse, and that turned out to be a very good idea. So, and here's something funny, this is a quick one. If you ever do something that's good and big and gains popularity, people will dig into your past, and they find out what you did when you were just learning to make games, and make a funny headline like this. Now, at the time, we were Condor, so I'm pretty sure they're talking about the Blizzard version and not ours. Even though they were the same. So, we finished the Justice League Task Force. It was the end of the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo era, and the next consoles were coming up, and there was a lot of them, 3DO and all of the others, and we didn't know where to make our bet, and we always wanted to make games for the PC, and the PC is always there. So we said, now we were going to be a PC game-making company. And so we wrote up a document of our ideas, and one of them was Diablo, and our document was terrible. You can see it's just text. There's a little a diagram of the town with the dungeon under the cathedral, and that actually made it. That's actually the structure of Diablo. But otherwise, it was 4 pages of text. And so we wandered around the Consumer Electronics Show with our crazy wall of text idea for a game. Now, at the time, the conventional wisdom was RPGs are dead. There is no market for them. They do not sell. Publishers didn't want to invest in them. But you grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we were enthusiasts of this, and we thought they were wrong. They can't be dead. And so we looked at the games that were on the market, and we began to realize that these were games for really hardcore nerds who love RPGs. That was us, so it was okay, we played them. But they were impenetrable. You know, they had tons of stats that if you didn't know the game, you didn't know how to put points into the stats, you would spend 40 minutes making your character. And these games turned off the masses. And so we had a little nugget of an idea. We had 5 pages of text, but it really came down to just a tiny little nugget of an idea. And that was that RPGs aren't dead, they're just too impenetrable. Everybody wants to hit a zombie or a skeleton with a sword, have a better sword pop off, and become more powerful. Everybody. They just didn't want to do all this other stuff. So our idea was to make a game where within 1 minute, you are hitting a skeleton over the head. All the depth, all the other stuff, you can layer on in manageable bites later. But just start right off, get the people involved, hitting a skeleton, finding a better item, now you have them. This was our idea. So we pitched our document around, and everyone said no. The ones that would talk to us at all would say no. Except the guys at Blizzard. They had just made Warcraft, and their parent company was called Davidson and Associates. They made educational software. They had bought Blizzard since they were Silicon and Synapse. They became Blizzard when they were bought. And Warcraft 1 was making more money than all of the educational software. So they said, find us more people to make games. Right at the same time, we were shipping our game around. And we already knew them a little, and so they understood it. And after some contract wrangling, we were able to graduate from this. This is my PowerPoint skills. To this. and you know, when you get a contract to make your first design, the first game that's really yours, everything changes. It's not just contract work at that point. It's kind of the fulfillment of a dream. And when you are able to fulfill your dream in a game, it turns out that it's also fulfilling the dreams of other people. And so it's just something much more special than working on a license. This was the last licensed game we ever worked on, was Justice League. But you have to pay the bills. We signed to make Diablo for $300,000, and it was not anywhere near enough, obviously. And at this point, we had employees. Our employees had spouses, they had children, and making sure your employees get their paychecks on time is the most terrifying part of making video games. So we had to do something, and at this point 3DO was coming out with their new machine, never came out, the M2, and they were throwing money at people to make games for them. And so we signed for them to make a football game that was a budget about 3 times the Diablo budget. So it was almost $1 million. We put 2 people on it. But we hit our milestones. And you know, and it worked. It made it so that we could survive this period. And the takeaway here is that your responsibility for running a game company is serious. You have employees, they have kids. This isn't just fun anymore. This isn't trying not to get a real job. This is time to be an adult. And I like to think that the fact that we took this all seriously matters, and that fate smiles on you when you take things seriously and you work hard. And 1 year into making Diablo, we got the phone call from Blizzard, from the parent company actually, and they wanted to acquire us. And I don't have this in my notes, but I'll tell a quick story about that. They make you an offer, and we were still, you know, we were still people who had no money. Every time we had payroll, it was a panic. And so when they called and offered you anything for your company, it seems like the biggest life-changing thing in the world. But we also know that you should always turn down the first offer. So we said, we said, thank you, that is wonderful, we really want to do this, but we really think that we should probably move to here on the offer. And at this time we were using fax machines to communicate. And so we sent back our letter saying, no, thank you, but we want this. And for the next 40 minutes, it was the worst 40 minutes of my life. I seriously went into my office, I slammed the door shut, and I started kicking furniture because we had turned down our chance to change our lives to try to get a little more. But then the phone rang again. He said, how about we meet halfway? We said, yes. And that was it. And even though, you know, they bought our Blizzard bought us to make Diablo, but it was pre-Diablo valuation. So, but even so, it created the conditions for us to do big things. And we almost started over on the game, and we made it something that it should have been. It would have been a much different game had we not been acquired halfway through. I guess the takeaway is that good things happen to you if you are available for them to do so. You'll never make a company or make that dream game you have if you don't do the things that lead to it. And for us, it was making the Game Boy and Game Gear games, and making the dumb game for the Atari Lynx. And those things led to us having these opportunities, and we were available for them to happen. So my advice is to find good, like-minded coworkers. They don't have to be geniuses. I said David Brevik is a genius, but none of us are. We're all just willing to work very hard. Of all our co-founding partners, I'm the only one with a college degree, and it was not applicable. So my advice is develop your skills, hone your craft, figure out what you're destined to make, and then take that first step. And then things happen for you. Speaking of being lucky and fortune, after we were acquired, we were thought, well, what are we going to do with this football game? We don't want to finish this football game. We want to make Diablo, you know. And 3DO called us, and they said, we just sold the rights to the M2 machine to Matsushita for $100 million. Is it perhaps okay if we don't do the football game anymore? We thought, what? Pay us our last milestone, then okay. And that was it. It was perfect. Yeah. So we're making Diablo, and our expectations still were that we might sell 100,000 copies. It might be a success. And then the phone rang again. This happens a lot. And it was Microsoft. And they were looking for game demos to put on this disc that they would put on the front of magazines that was introducing Windows games. And originally, Diablo was going to be a DOS game. But they convinced us that we're going to make things all Windows now. We thought, okay. And so they put our game on their little demo disc, and it went out to millions and millions of people on the front of magazines. And that changed everything, because then our phone started to ring a lot. And it was people looking for interviews and all kinds of things, because our game demo was the best one on the disc. And that's when we realized that this was actually going to be a real game, and it was going to be a success, and this was actually going to happen. And I'm not going to go too much into the development of Diablo or Diablo 2, because it's something that's been talked about a million times. So I'll talk just around it a little bit. Diablo came out, and it was a smash hit, and we all congratulated ourselves. And okay, actually, I skipped something. Before I go into that, one of the things that I'm most proud of Diablo was something that we didn't even do. So we were working with Blizzard South at this point. We called them Blizzard South because we were Blizzard North. They hated this because they were Blizzard. And so for the next 10 years, we always said Blizzard South. And I encourage you to do so as well. But one of the things that made Diablo incredible was the option up here above the regular multiplayer options, the BattleNet. And a lot of people don't remember that this is the first BattleNet game, and it was the first game ever that you would click one button and you were playing with people all around the world. And so I like to think we were a little bit of a part of making gaming a global phenomenon. And we kind of realized that suddenly we're playing a game, there's someone from Germany and someone from Korea in the game. And that was just something that never happened before. And I think for millions of people, this was the first experience of gaming as a global community. And so this was entirely due to the guys at Blizzard South, but I feel proud of it just because I had an association with it. And then it comes out, and a couple weeks were great, and then we find out that people actually cheat in games. This was not something that, again, we thought we were going to sell 100,000 copies and it would be a modest success, and that was it. It got big, and people started cheating, and it was ruining our game, and the whole world was collapsing around us. So what are we going to do? We're going to fix this by making it a client-server game instead of peer-to-peer, and try to do away with the cheating. And we did. We sort of fixed the cheating. and Diablo 2 was begun. Someone said that the only things that are worthwhile in life require an effort that borders on insanity. And that was true here. We totally underestimated the amount of work and the amount of time, and ended up crunching 7 days a week, all waking hours for over a year. This was a bad idea. People broke up with their boyfriends and girlfriends. They began to physically break down. But it came out, and it was worth it. My encouragement is you have to balance your maniacal work with taking care of your life, except maybe just violate that just once. And before I go on, I promised that I would tell the story of Deckard Cain here, and this is a good time because I'm leaving Diablo after this. So there is a connection between the actor Harrison Ford and the NPC in Diablo, Deckard Cain, and I'll tell you what it is. So Deckard Cain's name came as a result of a contest that we ran. Some people know the first half of the story, but not the second. We ran a contest that if you win the contest, it was just a drawing, your name would be in an NPC in our game. And so we picked 2 names from it, and one of them was Deckard Cain Elder. And we thought, we can't come up with a better name than this for an NPC in a million years. So we're going to make him our main NPC, and we will call him Deckard Cain the Elder, because that made more sense. The actual name of this person was Deckard Cain Elder. And we find out later that the guy who entered put his child's name on it, and his child's name was Deckard Cain Elder. So yes, there's this guy walking around the world, his name is Deckard Cain Elder, and he has to explain this to people every time he introduces himself. But the father named his kid after the character Rick Deckard in Blade Runner that was played by Harrison Ford. So Harrison Ford inspired this father to name his kid, which entered a contest and became Deckard Cain the Elder in Diablo. So that is the Deckard Cain story. So the next thing is to make more Diablo 2. Diablo 2 came out, it was big, and so we had momentum, we knew how to make this stuff now. So half of our company went to work on another game, and half of the company worked on the expansion set. And I was fortunate enough to co-lead this project with my partner, Tyler Thompson. And to date, the only reason I bring this up is just an expansion. The only reason I bring it up, it was the only Blizzard game that came out on time and on budget. This was great, but it reinforced the idea with us that we could do no wrong. Everything we touched turned to gold. And my takeaway for you is this is not true. So this is when things started to go a little bit pear-shaped at Blizzard. Blizzard was never an indie company. I mean, it was, but it had a corporate parent. And before our deal was even done in signing with Blizzard, an absurd sequence of events began. First, Davidson and Associates sold their company to CUC International. This was while our deal was being done. It scared us a lot because we liked Bob and Jan Davidson. And we didn't know these new people. And these new people weren't game makers. They made coupon books that went out in the mail, and you would use the coupons to buy things. They made millions on this, and this was in the early 90s. There were irrational expansions of companies going on at this point. And so they bought Davidson and Associates to buy Blizzard. CUC International then promptly merged with HFS Corporation. Who was HFS? Well, they owned Avis Rental Car, Howard Johnson's Hotels, and other things that had nothing to do with games. They formed a new company called Sendin. Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. So Sendin then announces that the CUC International portion was doing massive accounting fraud, and the stock dropped to 83%. Our deal was a stock deal. Our stock options were all dead and underwater, and they never came back. We lost a lot of our money that we got from doing this. And then Sendin was now cash poor, looking to sell something for money, and they sold our company to a company called Havas. Havas then sold our company to Vivendi, And so every year we would go with our games to the Consumer Electronics Show, and our booth would have a different name on the top. And then we began to read on Yahoo News, because that's where you got your news at this point in time, that Vivendi was shopping us to, is this wrong up there? My arrows are out of alignment. I made this in Google Slides, and then it exported as PowerPoint, so my arrows are really lined up. But we found, we looked on Yahoo News, and we're being sold to various things. And we're Vivendi selling Blizzard to Electronic Arts, Vivendi selling Blizzard to Microsoft. We would make a Western publishing deal and an Eastern publishing deal. Because if we just made the Western one, they would have called the Eastern publisher for Eastern publishing in Asia. Instead, we thought, why are they going to, we'll just do it directly and skip the middleman. This was our first big mistake. But we were off and running. And we made Hellgate London. And it was our introduction to the idea that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Turns out that we had picked the wrong partners. Our Western publisher was the Western branch of Namco Bandai. And right away, the guy who signed us, the CEO of the US branch, was busted for embezzling. This happens too much, doesn't it? It's a recurring thing, yeah. And so they kicked him out and brought a new team from Japan in to run the Western branch. And they said, we don't want to make PC games at all. Make your game, instead of an MMO, a single-player game. And we said, we can't do that. We've already signed this contract. We've already announced it. And we are too far down that road. And we have another publisher who's waiting for an MMO. So we had to make our own publishing unit and use our existing budget and our existing time frame to do all of the things that someone who runs an MMO has to do. Take money, customer support, all of these things. And we ran out of money, and we got to the end, and Handbitsoft gave us $1 million loan to go find studio funding, because now studio funding was the popular model to fund your thing. So we went off and we got studio funding, and we're in China. And we got a deal. And we're flying to Korea to announce triumphantly that we have this deal, and everything's going to be saved, and everything's going to be okay. During this few days, another company did a hostile takeover of Handbitsoft. And so we arrived in Korea to an entirely different management. And actually, we were met at the airport by a Handbit employee whose face was white. And they said, something terrible has happened. We've been taken over. They are not good people. And so we thought, holy shit. This is not good. And that was our first introduction that there are evil people out there who do evil things for evil reasons. And they shit-canned our deal, and everything went to hell, and we had to shut down. And that's it was widely publicized. This was something that was not secret. You know, I will blame the Handbitsoft guys, but the truth is that when things got tight, when arrangements started to go pear-shaped, we were too stubborn to simplify our plans, and we wanted to make exactly what we were going to make, and we were not going to compromise. We should have pivoted, we should have simplified, we should have realized this is too chaotic, and we didn't. So while I like to blame them, we have to blame ourselves as well. That's just a fact. But what a lot of people don't remember is we had another project at the time. We decided that since we have to make this whole MMO infrastructure, we should make a tiny game just to test it out before we turn on Hellgate London. And so we got a team together in Seattle to make a game that we called Mythos. And Mythos was just a very simple little version of Hellgate London, but it looked more like a Diablo. And we had a guy named Travis Baldry lead it up. He was a crazy genius. And unfortunately, when all this went down and we were running out of money and they shit-canned our deal from China, the terms of our little loan to go out and find studio funding held as collateral the IP for Mythos. So they said no deal because they had to agree to the deal. No deal, and we are stealing Mythos. So they stole our IP, and we had to close up shop. I had to lay off 125 of my closest friends, and it was the worst time in my professional life. And we promised that when this was done, we were going to take a year off just to decompress. But then we started thinking, we have this team in Seattle that is small. They have everything to make a game. If we're going to resurrect and start over, this is the best way to do it. And so we said, okay, we're not taking any time off. We took 2 days, a weekend. The Monday, we called up and said, okay, do you guys in Seattle want to keep going, and we'll try to find a deal. And the beauty of our business, again, is that all you need are desks and computers and some money. And so we bought our desks and computers out of liquidation for pennies on the dollar, and we had our same desks and our same computers again. And we went out to look for a deal, and sure enough, we formed a game company called Runic Games, and we were going to make a game called Torchlight. And the only thing missing was the money. So we went back to China, to the company that was looking to help us out before everything went crazy. And eventually we made a deal with Perfect World. Now the conventional wisdom was don't work with Chinese companies. This turned out also to not be true. We've been with Perfect World now for 10 years, and we have as good a relationship now as we've had at any time. So it worked out perfectly for us. We got to know them. They were gamers. They were formed by people who just made games. So we sort of spoke the same language, and it's been great. We made Torchlight 1 in 11 months from blank computers to a shipping product. And even then, everyone said, why are you doing this? You were going to be crushed by Diablo 3. So we lived most of our lives at Runic under the fear of Diablo 3. But we came out with Torchlight. Diablo 3 turned out to be delayed many times. And it hit Steam at the right time. This was a time where they were still curating games. They were Seattle also, so they were local. And they liked the idea that we were an indie game that they could sell on Steam, so they put us on the front page. And that made a huge difference for us. And fate smiled on us, and we were back. Then after that, the next logical step was Torchlight 2. We were able to make a better game. We didn't have desperation at that point. Torchlight 1 sold well, so we had money. And we were able to kind of sit back and really dig into a meatier version of Torchlight. But I was flying up to Seattle every 2 weeks because I didn't want to leave San Francisco. And that started to get old. And then all of a sudden, one day, my brother and our lead guy, Travis Baldry, decided that our 25-person company was too corporate, and they wanted to make games with 2 people. So, a very friendly parting, but they left, and that kind of put everything into chaos. But with them gone, my power was unchecked. And so the title we worked on then was this absolutely beautiful game called Hob. I didn't stay there till the finish of Hob, but I wanted to put it up here because it was a beautiful game, and I'm proud of my work on it. It required a lot of pain and restarting. The structure of the company with the old leadership did not work with the new leadership. We had to lay people off. There was a lot of painful things, but ended up with a beautiful game. However, I was not there to see the finish of it because halfway through, Perfect World called me up and said, Max, we want you to start a studio in San Francisco to make big games. You can do whatever you want and we'll pay for everything. And I figure I'm nearing 50 years old. I don't know if that will ever happen again. So I said yes, and that's where I am today. We formed EchtraGames. Perfect World made a great offer to us, and we are making our secret project in San Francisco. I got some of the key players from our old days back together. Tyler Thompson, who worked on the Lord of Destruction expansion with me, is our lead. We got David Glenn making our backgrounds again. We got Matt Ullman doing our music. So we also got Justin Miller, who did all our multiplayer stuff for Torchlight. And so we got a great team together, and oh my God, I still have a little bit of life force left in me. I can't talk about our game, I'm sorry. Next year I'll be able to talk about what we're doing. I could say it's a big online game, that's all. So that's pretty much all I have. What do I want you guys to learn from this? First of all, everything changes, so just take everything that I've said and see if it applies somehow to your struggles and what you're doing. Take the time to learn the craft. Work on stupid little games because it teaches you how to finish them. As we know, finishing games is the hardest part of making games. The first 90% of your game is fairly easy, and then you have to do the hard last 90%. That's what you learn when you make dumb little games. Is you learn how to finish them. Number 2 is luck is real and it's out of your control. You are simply along for the ride, but make yourself available for good things to happen. Number 3, be careful when choosing your partners. Big companies go out of business. Big companies decide to take your whole wing of games and get rid of them. The bigger companies are not the safest, so find someone whose interests are aligned with yourself. Work harder. Accomplishment is the product of intense work, but don't kill yourself. It is important. There's a lot of burnout in this industry. There's a lot of young people in this room and very few old people like ourselves. There's a reason for this. The next thing is don't go for the money. You know, people always say, look at what Fortnite is making. Let's make a Fortnite clone and go for the money. That's a very bad idea. It will never work. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been wasted trying to make a WoW killer. Don't go for the money, but go where there is money. Wherever your game, whatever kind of dream game you have in your mind, somewhere there is money being made on this sort of thing. Find those people, get into that area. You want to be, I always say, you want to be in the money hose. You don't want to go for the money, but be there so that when you need money, you're in the right place where money is happening. Have realistic financial expectations. It's very rare to make money on your game. You are a success if your game got you through to the next game. It's very hard to, there's a fine line between breaking even and making a lot of money. And you always see these stories of people who make crazy money and they're making $1 million a day. This is not real. It happens very rarely and it's not a good expectation to have. Number 9, make the right business deal. It doesn't always have to be the best deal for you. Sometimes this is just how we can have a company at all. That's good enough. Know what you need at the time and know what you want. You'll be able to later make a better deal when the time comes. And number 10 is, remember, we're making games. Relax. Don't let the stress burn you out. We do this because it's fun. We do this because it brings joy to people. Nobody cares if you made money, but they care about the games that you made. I'm here today because of Diablo. Not because we made money, not because of any other things we did. And that's something that we will take to our grave, and that's better than any amount of money in the world. And so that's why we are here. That's why we are making games, is to bring joy to people and then to see that in the world. And here I am in Bologna, Italy, talking to you about games that I made, which is just insane. So that's it. Thank you for listening to me.
Max, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Actually, I was going to ask you, but the big question I had. Sorry. That's okay. We're better in the dark. The question that I was going to ask you was, how do you intentionally put yourself in a position to get lucked into? But I think that the 10 points, your sort of 10 commandments there, have answered that question. I mean, it seems like it's a mix of skill, so technical skill, but also being a very open, available person, so kind of the more soft skilly, relationshiping and talking to a lot of people. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so people think it's impossible for us to make a game. It's impossible for us to convince someone to give us money. This is not true. Publishers are there, and their job is to find people to give money to make a game. That's what they do. That's their entire function. They want to give you money. And what people do unintentionally is create reasons why they're too scared to do it, why they won't give you money. You're not ready, you're too unstable, whatever. And your job is very simply to make them comfortable. Your job is to fulfill their desire, which is to get a game happening. You know, they want to give you money. They will find every reason not to because they're careful, they're not idiots. But they really want to do it. And so if you work on some dumb little games and you can ship them, they will say, okay, these guys can make a game. It didn't matter if it made money or not. It just matters that you know how to do this. You know how to make a game. And talk to them at conventions. Get to know them. Have a beer with them. Everything you can do to make them comfortable to fund you. Because this is their job. This is literally what they do for a living, is they fund game companies. So remember that. This isn't impossible. This isn't something that's crazy. This is what they do, and this is what you do. You make games, they fund games. This should be easier than it is. And I think a lot of times we create our own barriers to that, to it being successful. And so again, just make yourself open to this. Do the little things along the way, and good things will happen. And this is luck happens when you've done the preparation.
It's great. Thank you. It's fantastic.